All right. Hello, everybody. I am going to be recording lecture videos for you each week, and this is going to be the recording for chapter number 1 in our Intro to Nutrition textbook. So, like I said, there'll be one of these per chapter for each of our chapters this semester. What I would like to do is try to keep these as short as possible, so that everyone is able to get through the bulk of the material without having to listen to a 2-hour lecture video. So what I'm doing right now is pulling up the share options here and getting my screen shared with you, and we're going to go over the PowerPoint for chapter 1 together. You do have access to the PowerPoint via Blackboard. So if you want to follow along with that or be taking notes, that would probably be ideal. All right. So chapter 1 is just kind of an introduction to the idea of what is nutrition. What are we sort of covering the rest of the semester in this course? Here we go. So the first thing is, like, why do we need to eat and drink? What's the purpose of eating and drinking? And the purpose of eating and drinking is so that we can take in nutrients. Now, nutrients not only give us the capacity to convert the energy in the food source to energy in our bodies in the form of ATP, they also provide the building blocks to allow us to build molecules in our bodies, to build our tissues, to make ourselves larger, to grow, and to be able to process energy and do all of that kind of stuff. So we're going to maintain our bodies. We're going to regulate our body activities with these nutrients that we're bringing in and the energy that they provide, and so forth. Now, nutrients are going to fall into one of 6 classes. The first 3 are our macromolecules. They're large molecules that we use in our bodies for building blocks and for a variety of other functions. Those 3 are carbohydrates, or carbs, as you might call them, lipids, or fats is the common type of lipid, and then proteins. All 3 of those are going to provide energy in the form of calories or kilocalories. When we talk about how many calories there are in something that we eat, like that contains 200 calories, we say calories with a capital C, which is the equivalent of a kilocalorie. Kilocalorie is 1,000 calories. It's kind of on that sort of metric system. What's a calorie? 1 calorie with a lowercase c is the amount of energy required to raise the temperature of 1 gram of water by 1 degree Celsius. So it's like a weird, convoluted definition. But calories, again, are the amount of energy that is provided by our 3 nutrient sources, or 3 major macronutrient sources: carbohydrates, lipids, and proteins. 3 other classes: vitamins, minerals, and water. Those don't necessarily provide calories in order for us to, make energy, but they do other things for our bodies, like help us regulate a bunch of metabolic processes. Water is a huge one in our bodies. It's kind of the main component of our bodies and is very, very necessary for our survival and for our bodies to live and be healthy. And then in addition to those 6 categories, we have non-nutrient compounds, which we're going to be talking about in a little bit in this chapter, that play a role in our health and fighting chronic diseases, but don't necessarily provide calories that we convert to ATP. All right, so now we know what food is and why we have to eat. The next topic gets into why we make the choices we do about what we eat and when we eat. So we choose foods beyond the basic need for nutrients, right? The basic need to obtain nutrients. And in fact, for a lot of people, a lot of the time, other things come into play a lot more than, the nutrient requirements that you are trying to meet in a day. So we don't necessarily think my body needs more vitamin C or my body needs more carbohydrates today. We're going to make choices based on other factors. So what tastes good to us? What's our particular taste? And culture plays a big role in that as well. There are different foods that different cultures eat sort of traditionally. And, we will choose foods that we are, comfortable with, choose foods that we grew up with a lot of times. Um, Other things would be social reasons and trends, gosh, like there'll be a trend with like a certain food that's what they call a superfood, which again, we'll get into in another chapter, what are superfoods and all of that. But we might hear a lot of stuff on the news or in social media about a certain food and how it's really, really good for you. The one I can think of off the top of my head would be acai. Everybody was really into acai, 10 years ago or something like that. So there's food trends, there's new foods and new superfoods and health foods that come out all the time. And if they have a good sort of media campaign about them, a lot of people will want to try them. What I think plays the biggest role for a lot of people is cost, time, and convenience. So, very few people that I know personally have an unlimited amount of money and an unlimited amount of time to worry about what you're eating. So everybody's on a fixed budget. Everybody has limited amounts of time. And a lot of times what choices we'll make about what we eat is what is convenient, what is cheap, what will take less time to prepare. So rather than going to the store and buying fairly expensive fresh ingredients, one might go to the drive-through at McDonald's and get a cheeseburger and fries and a soda for, $8, $10, something like that. And then habits and emotions. We get in habits of eating certain things or eating certain amounts of things, I guess. And our emotions are also going to play a big role in that. So as a culture, we kind of set our both celebrations and like comfort around food. A lot of times our family gatherings are based around food. Um, if we're happy, we want to celebrate a birthday, we're going to have cake and ice cream. Um, if we're sad, we had a rough day at work, what's going to make us feel better? Maybe a big bowl of ice cream, right? So our feelings, our emotions, and our habits also lead into the choices that we make about what we eat, when we eat, and how much we eat. All right. So the next few slides are going to be talking about what is nutrition and why is good nutrition so important? Well, nutrition is the science that studies how nutrients and compounds in foods nourish you, help you function, and affect body functions and health. So, that's what nutrition is, the scientific study of how food affects your body, essentially. Um, if we are deficient in nutrients or if we have an excess in nutrients, any sort of imbalance in the amount of these important nutrients can affect your long-term health. So with nutrition, just because something is good for you doesn't mean that you should have unlimited amounts of that, right? It has to be a balance still. So just because vitamin A is good for you, that does not mean that you should consume unlimited, excessive quantities of vitamin A, because that vitamin, as we'll talk about in the vitamins chapter, has the potential to have toxicity if you build up too much of it in your system. So too much of a good thing is actually a bad thing. So not enough is bad for you, too much is bad for you as well, or can potentially be bad for you as well. And the reason that good nutrition is really important to us is this last bullet point here. Good nutrition, we know there's lots of studies on this, and you can read a million studies on the topic. We know that good nutrition reduces our risk of developing chronic diseases, like heart disease, diabetes, certain types of cancer are heavily related to our diet, stroke, again, these particular chronic illnesses or chronic conditions that we can develop throughout our lifetimes. Eating a good, healthy, balanced, varied diet goes a long way to lowering your risk of developing those bad conditions. So here we're looking at the leading causes of death in the United States. I won't read all of these to you, but what you might notice is the ones that are in bold font here. Heart disease, cancer. Those are the top two killers of people in the United States. And these numbers come from, they're the most updated numbers that are available as of 2023. So heart disease is the #1 killer of Americans. Cancer is #2. And then COVID-19, accidents or unintentional injury, stroke, chronic respiratory diseases, Alzheimer's, diabetes, influenza, pneumonia, and kidney disease. What you'll notice about the ones that are bolded are all things that your diet can lower your risk of you developing these things. So heart disease, having a heart healthy diet, a lower saturated fat diet, getting more exercise. Those are things that your lifestyle can lower your risk of you developing. And again, certain types of cancer. So if you think of like colon cancer or colorectal cancer, one of the biggest risk factors for developing colon cancer is eating a high fat, low fiber diet. So knowing that, if you eat a lower fat, high fiber diet, you can lower your risk of developing colorectal cancer. That might be something to keep in mind. So low fat, high fiber will drastically lower your risk of developing colon cancer. Strokes and diabetes, those are pretty obvious ones. Alzheimer's disease, there is a potential component with like obesity and Alzheimer's disease. So all things that have factors that are controllable. All right, so we're going to be looking at nutrients again, looking at essential nutrients. So what does it mean to be an essential nutrient? Why do you need these essential nutrients? All of that kind of stuff. So when we're looking at our 6 main classes of nutrients, they're all essential to maintaining our health, to maintaining normal homeostatic body function. We're going to split those into categories based on how much of them you need in your diet in order to maintain your health, right? So how much is enough? Macronutrients, macro means large, right? So macronutrients are nutrients that we would need in higher quantities in our diet. These are the ones that are energy yielding nutrients that we want to get adequate amounts of in our diet. Carbohydrates, lipids, and proteins are our 3 types of macronutrients. So again, ones that we need in high quantities that we can use to generate ATP or to yield energy that we would use to power our bodies. Carbohydrates and lipids, those are ones that are primarily used in the body as energy or for the purpose of producing ATP. Proteins tend to be used for other things first, but can also still be used for, their energy quantity if necessary. Micronutrients then are the opposite of that. These are needed in smaller amounts. So things like vitamins and minerals would fall into a micronutrient category. We need to have them in our diets to maintain our health, but we need much smaller quantities of those than we do of, carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids. And then our last one here is water. Obviously, we can live for a much longer period of time without food. but we only live a couple days without water. Water in high quantities, or this says copious amounts of water. The amount of water that you need depends on your activity level and all kinds of things like that. But at a minimum, you want to probably drink, you know, eight 8-ounce glasses of water per day, I think is kind of the go-to number. You want to make sure you get adequate water. Water also has an upper limit, though. You don't want to drink so much water that you dilute your blood and cause electrolyte imbalances that can kill you as well. So yes, copious amounts of water, but not so much water that you end up dying from acute water intoxication. All right, so here we're looking at nutrients that are in our bodies and that are in different types of food. So we'll notice we're looking at the top, what makes up your body? Well, we are mostly water, almost 60% water is what makes up our body. And then roughly, and it depends person to person again, it'll vary a little bit, but roughly 20% fat, 17% protein, and then a small amount of vitamins, minerals, and carbohydrates there. But we're mostly water in our bodies. If we go down to chicken breast, a chicken breast comes from a chicken, and chickens' bodies are mostly water, just like our bodies are mostly water. So a chicken breast is still about 74% water, quite a bit of water there. 22% protein, and then a small quantity of vitamins, minerals, and fat. Then we're going to go down and look at broccoli. Now, broccoli is, this is raw broccoli, not cooked broccoli. Raw broccoli is almost 90% water. It's a great source of water. 7% carbohydrate, and then a little mix of protein, vitamins, and minerals. But again, vitamins and minerals, those are our micronutrients, so we only need those in small quantities anyway. I would say, a grilled chicken breast and broccoli are both really good choices in terms of a healthy food choice. Your chicken breast is going to provide that necessary protein and a little bit of fat. We're going to get from the broccoli a little bit of carbohydrate, a tiny bit of protein. But no matter what we're eating, we're still eating mostly water. So our water content in a day doesn't only come from the liquids that we drink, it also comes from the food that we eat, because the food we eat was at least once living, and all living things have a high quantity of water in them. All right, so we talked about kind of the definition of a calorie, lowercase c calorie. A kilocalorie is just 1,000 times that. So the definition is the amount of energy to raise the temperature of 1 kilogram of water by 1 degree Celsius. And then in terms of our macronutrients, carbs, lipids, and proteins, each gram of those is going to provide a certain number of kilocalories. So for our carbs and our protein, we get 4 kilocalories of energy per gram of carb or protein. And then fats are more than double that. Fats provide 9 calories or kilocalories per gram. So that would be why our body stores our extra energy in the form of fat, because it is, you get a lot more bang for your buck, so to speak. You get 9 kilocalories per gram of fat, versus if we tried to store all of our energy in the form of carbohydrates. And again, we don't really store energy in protein, because protein is used for lots of other stuff, as enzymes, as transport proteins, as contractile proteins in our muscles. So proteins are more functional in the body, and we typically don't burn them for energy unless there's a deficiency somewhere else. But storing all of our energy in the form of carbohydrates, we'd have to store a lot more of it to get the same amount of energy that we could store in a gram of fat. We'd have to have double the amount of carbohydrate stores, or more than double the amount of carbohydrate stores in our body, if we didn't have fat. So fat is an excellent source of energy, and it's a really great way to store energy in your body in a very condensed fashion. All right, so carbs, lipids, and proteins are also considered organic compounds, and what organic compounds means is not that we use, pesticide-free, herbicide-free type stuff to grow our bodies or to make these nutrients. Organic means that they contain carbon, that they are a carbon-based molecule. All organic compounds are going to contain carbon, and then there's going to be a lot of oxygen and hydrogen attached there. And that is the case again for carbs. And for lipids or fats, protein has a little bit of extra. It has some nitrogen, so that makes it a little bit different, but those are kind of the main atoms that you're going to find in the human body. The number one is oxygen, and then we have hydrogen, hydrogen and carbon and nitrogen. So those are kind of the big atoms that you'll find in the body. All right. With carbs, the carbohydrates, their main job in the body is to provide glucose. And glucose is a really super important energy source. It's the major component that our bodies use to make ATP. And our brains will use exclusively glucose. They cannot use lipids to make ATP. They must have a glucose supply in order to make ATP. So carbohydrates, I know we kind of think of them as though they are the enemy of our health, that they make us gain weight and that kind of stuff, but not necessarily the case. Carbohydrates in their appropriate quantities provide glucose, which allows our bodies to make energy, to make ATP. Fats, again, are our long-term storage for our nutrients, but they also help to insulate our bodies and help us maintain our body temperature, as well as cushion and protect our organs. So fats are important in that way. And then proteins, as I said, can provide energy, but don't as often. Our bodies will preferentially use carbohydrates and fats over using protein unless we're in sort of a starvation mode. Because we use them for growth and maintenance of muscles, tissues, and organs. They make up a lot of our amino acid-based hormones. They provide the building blocks for our enzymes that help us carry out chemical reactions. And we utilize them within the immune system as well in the form of antibodies that our B cells make. And then again, we use proteins for transporting other nutrients. We have proteins in the cell membrane that help us move things into and out of our cells. So proteins really are the workhorses of our bodies, and we don't really want to burn them for energy unless it's a totally necessary process. All right. So if you want to calculate a food, what you can, or the energy in a particular food, what you can do is just take the total grams of carbohydrates and protein, multiply that by 4, and then take the total grams of fat, multiply that by 9, add those two numbers together, and you'll end up with the total amount of calories provided by a particular food. You can do that if you want to, but there's a lot of apps that'll do that for you. And, also we have food labeling, so the food label probably will have that information on there if it's a prepackaged food. If it's something that you're making at home, you can calculate that, with that simple math equation. All right, so what do we need vitamins and minerals for? Well, a lot of times vitamins and minerals are going to, we're going to do a few things. Number one, a lot of them work alongside our protein-based enzymes to help them speed up chemical reactions in the body. So in particular, the B vitamins tend to be coenzymes in fat and carbohydrate metabolism. So we need those B vitamins in order to break down carbs and fat to make ATP. So they're essential nutrients in that way. What's the difference between vitamins and minerals? Well, vitamins are organic compounds. Typically, we obtain those from food. So vitamin C, the B vitamins, vitamin D, all of that kind of stuff. And then minerals are inorganic. And again, organic meaning carbon containing, inorganic just means it's not carbon containing. But again, they're gonna also help out our enzymes to some degree, but they have key roles in a number of body processes and structures. They're just as essential. They just are inorganic. And then water, again, water is very vital. We don't survive very long without a fresh source of potable water. So basically, we are mostly water. As we saw in that previous slide, we're, roughly 60% water. So they're part of a fluid medium, both inside and outside of our cells. They are the environment in which our chemical reactions take place. Water is essential in maintaining our body temperature. So when we get too hot, we sweat. We utilize the water to evaporate that from our skin to draw away the heat from our body. Also, basically, water is the medium through which we transport nutrients. It's the primary component in our blood plasma. So it helps us to transport nutrients and oxygen to our cells and remove waste products and move all of that stuff around our bodies. And then it's a great lubricant in our joints, our movable joints, our eyes. Our tears are primarily water. Our saliva is primarily water. The mucus that we secrete into our intestinal tract, also primarily water. And then again, it's a nice, cushiony, protective substance for our organs, particularly our brain. All of our organs, but particularly our brain, which is surrounded by and filled with a watery substance known as cerebrospinal fluid, or CSF. All right, so then that comes down to how we know what the nutrients are, we know what we need them for, what's the best way to get all of these nutrients into our diet, because there's a lot of different stuff, especially with vitamins and minerals and those micronutrients. There's a lot of those nutrients that we need. What's the best way to get them? Well, the best way to get them is to eat a well-balanced, varied diet. So eating all 6 essential nutrients, eating a well-balanced diet, which also includes fiber. Fiber helps to, it can help lower your cholesterol and lower your risk for cardiovascular disease. It also helps to move things through your digestive tract. So it lowers your risk of having things like constipation and diverticulitis, and also colorectal cancer, as we discussed previously. Phytochemicals are just naturally occurring chemicals in plant-based products, not animal-based products, but plant-based products that have been shown to help fight a number of diseases. All right. And where do we get these things? Whole grains, fruits, and vegetables. Those are great sources of vitamins and minerals, as well as our phytochemicals and our fiber. So I always say you want to eat the rainbow, not taste the rainbow like, Skittles, but eat the rainbow, eat fruits and veggies of all different colors, because you're going to get special compounds, special phytonutrients, and a different set of vitamins and minerals in each fruit or vegetable, kind of based on the color of that. All right, so what about supplements? Because everybody wants to know, like, what supplements should I take? Do I need to take supplements? Are they beneficial? There's a couple of instances in which I think specific supplements can be beneficial, but for most people, the best way to get all the nutrients that you need would be through a balanced and varied natural diet. Yeah, so if you're someone who has higher needs, like let's say you're someone who's pregnant, a person who's pregnant, their nutrient needs are higher, particularly with a number of kind of vitamins and minerals that are important for development of the fetus. So Pregnant people need more iron. Iron supplementation is often recommended. Actually, just a daily prenatal vitamin is recommended for anyone who may become pregnant, is thinking about becoming pregnant, or is currently pregnant. They should be taking the prenatal vitamin, because there's a number of extra nutrients that are required during pregnancy to allow the fetus to develop normally. Folate or folic acid is another big one that pregnant people will need more of than your everyday person. Folate is important in developing nervous system, the neural tube. So without adequate folate, the baby's kind of brain and spinal cord don't develop properly or can have problems developing. And then the other reason that one might want to take a supplement is if they have dietary restrictions, like they're lactose intolerant. They might want to choose a calcium and vitamin D supplement to help meet their needs, because that's where we get a lot of our calcium is through dairy products. So if they can't consume dairy products, they might need to take calcium as a supplement, or get fortified. A lot of like orange juice is fortified with calcium and vitamin D as well. So taking a supplement or drinking other beverages that are fortified, or eating other foods that are fortified. All right, so there's what we should be eating. What about the typical American diet? How are we doing in terms of healthy balance with our nutrients? Well, the typical American diet is high in added sugar, high in sodium, high in saturated fat, and high in calories. Americans typically will consume about 17 teaspoons of added sugar every day. Every day. And that is a huge problem. It's not that sugar or glucose is necessarily the enemy, again, because carbohydrates aren't the enemy, but when you consume excessive amounts of sugar, sugar doesn't really contain any other important nutrients. There's no fiber. There are no like vitamins or minerals associated with the added refined sugar. So what you're getting is pure calories, pure excess calories above and beyond what you need there, which leads to excess fat deposition, overweight, obesity, heart disease, and all those chronic diseases that go along with being overnourished there. We tend to be low in vitamin D, low in calcium, low in potassium, and low in fiber. And then people who menstruate, it says women fall short. I would say people who menstruate tend to fall short on iron, not because necessarily there's a difference biologically there, but because there is a pre-planned monthly shed of blood, the requirement for iron is a little bit higher. So menstruation causes blood loss, which means that we need more iron. All right, so looking at the status of Americans, generally speaking here, again, these are the most up-to-date numbers that we have. The incidence of overweight and obesity is on the rise, continues to be on the rise. Adults, over 70% are overweight. And of that 70% that fall into the overweight category, 40% of those people are also obese. So overweight includes everybody who is just overweight and those who are considered obese. Again, 40% of people in that overweight category are also obese. And then for children, more than 16% of children and adolescents aged 2 to 19 are considered obese. And that number has been kind of continuing to rise for both children and adults, but it's really concerning that we have children that are aged 2 to 19 that are considered obese. So yeah, it's a major health concern for our country. So often we might have like a preconceived notion of what type of person is going to be overweight or obese in this country, but obesity is ubiquitous. It does not discriminate, and it is an epidemic. It, it covers people across all races, all religions, all socioeconomic statuses in this country. No one is immune from the obesity epidemic. What are the causes? It's kind of hard to say, but we're consuming definitely more calories than are needed. As we saw previously, we consume too much added sugar, too much saturated fat, too much salt, things of that nature. And then we also don't really burn calories because we drive to and from work and we sit at a desk all day and we work on our computers. And then when we come home, we sit on the couch and we play on our phone, or we watch TV, or we do both at the same time, but we don't really move our bodies. So the effects of all of that lead to increased rates of type 2 diabetes, especially in children. We used to consider type 1 diabetes childhood diabetes because it's an autoimmune disease that develops where your immune system attacks your pancreas and you can't produce insulin to help control your blood sugar. And then type 2 diabetes would be adult onset diabetes, in that it's more related to lifestyle issues than it is genetics there. But type 2 diabetes is on the rise even in kids. Again, their obesity levels are on the rise and all of that stuff. Also increased heart disease, cancer, and stroke incidence along with these higher rates of obesity and overweight. There's an article you can read in the textbook, Nutrition in the Real World, for obese and malnourished. Here we're looking at the prevalence of obesity, so the number of individuals, the percentage of the state populations that are considered overweight or obese here. So this is prevalence of obesity only. As we see, there are no states that are that dark green color that are less than 20% people are obese. There's only 2 states, Colorado and one of those out east states, I'm not sure which one that is, are between 20 and 25%. And then we look at the yellow boxes, 25 to 30%. Orange boxes are 30 to 35, and then red are greater than or equal to 35%. So you'll notice the vast majority of the states in the country are between 30 and more than 35% rates of obesity in those states. And the red ones, you'll notice, kind of fall along the Midwest and the southern United States. So there is kind of some, I don't know, some regional differences, I guess. If you look out east and out west, you'll notice lower rates of obesity than Midwest and the South. And that could be just kind of differences in the culture there, different foods that are more common, or more available to people. Also, environmental differences, people being able to be outside most of the year, be more active, and all of that kind of stuff. So there are, I guess, kind of regional differences there. All right. So poor, obese, and malnourished, that seems like that is, well, it's a paradox, a troubling paradox, right? You shouldn't, we don't think that we could possibly be malnourished and be obese at the same time. But it is very, very common for people who are obese to also be malnourished, and that they are not receiving or they're not taking in adequate, healthy nutrients. They're not taking in the appropriate quantities of their vitamins and minerals and all of that kind of stuff. So Americans living at or below the poverty level have much higher rates of obesity than affluent Americans, and there's a number of things that go into that. The number and type of foods that are available to them is different. The cost of healthier food tends to be higher than the cost of cheap food, or it has been in the past. Education levels are different there. So, people who are poor have higher rates of obesity than wealthier Americans. Um, Kids who are poor, who live at or below the poverty level, are often what we call food insecure. The adults are as well, but food insecurity is that they are, unsure of where or when their next meal is going to be available. So they don't have guaranteed food for 3 meals a day and snacks and all of that kind of stuff. They're more likely to be deficient in iron, have colds and headaches, delayed cognitive development, and be at risk for behavioral problems. It's hard to learn when all you think about is that you are hungry. It's hard to pay attention in class when your stomach is rumbling and you feel really tired. When you're iron deficient, you are also tired a lot. So yeah, food insecurity has negative impacts not only on the physical health, but the cognitive development and all of that of children. All right, so things that can lead to obesity in folks who don't have a lot of money or those who are food insecure. Inconsistent meal patterns. So you don't eat regularly, so you go into kind of starvation mode in the middle. And then when food is available, you eat as much as you possibly can. So it's, not a great pattern. Household stress. People who are stressed maybe don't make the best, meal choices and all of that. A lot of times folks in lower socioeconomic brackets don't have access to regular grocery stores or supermarkets, but they do have a gas station at the corner and a McDonald's down the block. So, access to fresh produce and fresh fruits and veggies and fresh food is limited. All right, so our government, the National Institutes of Health, have this program that they put out like every 10 years. It's called Healthy People. And what they do is they set these health goals for the country. They're looking at preventing disease and promoting health and, looking at where we are and trying to create these programs to educate the public and to help improve these different measures that we are falling short on. So here's some of them, some of the things that Healthy People 2030 are looking to, or this program is looking to achieve. So reducing consumption of calories from added sugar by persons aged 2 and over. The status right now is 13.5%. The target for Americans is 11.5%. So they want to lower that rate of excess calorie consumption by added sugar by about 2% by the year 2030. So that's kind of how to read this. And you can kind of go through that table on your own to see what sort of goals there are. You can also access the website Healthy People 2030 and take a look at the other different outcomes and measures that they're looking at. All right. So we know that we need to eat better. We know that we need to do, we need to eat a healthy, well-balanced, and varied diet. But there's all kinds of places, all kinds of people are saying all kinds of different things in terms of what we should be eating, how much, when, eating a carb-restricted diet, eating a vegetarian diet versus, eating an all raw diet. So how do we know what the best thing is to do when there's so much information out there? Well, what you want to do is look for information from an authoritative health source or nutrition institution, because what they are going to do is take their advice, your doctors and your nutritionists and all of that kind of stuff. They're going to take the information from all kinds of scientific experiments and scientific experts, and they're going to find what the consensus is collect all of that information, and then provide advice to you. Whereas if you're just reporting newspaper headlines or television news stories, they're looking at one single research study, and that can be really misleading. So you want to get advice from places and people who are looking at the big picture, not just one study. All right, so how do we evaluate nutrition news? Before you make a change in your own behavior and lifestyles, based on media reports, you want to look at it with a critical eye. You want to see, was the research finding published in a peer-reviewed journal? So where did it come from? Where was it published? If it was in a peer-reviewed journal, you got a pretty good chance that it is accurate and good information. Was the study done using animal models or humans? If it was using animal models, they're similar to humans, but you can't necessarily extrapolate the results from animals or mice, for example, into humans. So you want to be careful about that. Did they have a representative sample? So do the study participants resemble me? And is this the first time I've heard about this, or is this, maybe I'm hearing about it more and more from different sources, right? So you want to be careful before you make big changes in your lifestyle. We should probably know a little bit about the scientific method already. That's going to be review for most of you, but the scientific method is the process by which scientists generate sound research findings. So we always start with step number 1. We make an observation, we ask a question, and we formulate a hypothesis. The hypothesis is kind of an explanation on trial or an idea based on the observation. Step 2, we conduct the experiments to test the hypothesis we came up with. And then step 3, we publish. Publishing is the important part, and especially publishing in a peer-reviewed journal. This is where we have other experts in the field review the research that was done and make sure that there were no errors, no glaring oversights, no conflicts of interest, all of that kind of stuff. If all of that comes through, those hypotheses, if you do your research, your hypothesis is supported, you publish those findings in a peer-reviewed journal, that can lead to the development of a theory and then establishes consensus if we can get enough information coming together in science. There's more than, one different type of the way that we do research. It's not all, hypothesis testing, right? There's also observational research where you are just looking at and not manipulating factors necessarily. So it involves looking at factors in 2 or more groups of subjects to see if there's a relationship to certain health outcomes. Number 1 type of that is an epidemiological research study where you're studying populations of people. So, for example, we'll look at the relationship of sun exposure with incidence of rickets in Norway compared with Australia. Epidemiological research is good, but it doesn't have a control group necessarily. It's just comparing 2 different groups without the controls that you would have in a laboratory experiment. So is the difference in incidence of rickets due to more or less sun exposure? Maybe, but it also could be due to some other unidentified lifestyle or diet factor that wasn't controlled for in this epidemiological research. So, it's good research, but it doesn't control for every possible variable out there. So it's not going to give you a causative relationship. There may be a relationship between people in Norway having higher levels of rickets versus those in Australia, but it doesn't necessarily, the different sun exposure doesn't necessarily cause the difference in the 2 groups. All right, and then experimental research. This is kind of the classic science as we know it. There's at least 2 groups of subjects. We have the experimental group, which are given a specific treatment. So if we're talking about like medications or supplements or something like that, they're given the active ingredient. And then we have a control group, which in the case of, again, a supplement or a medication, they're given the placebo. So they're given a pill, but it doesn't contain any of the active ingredient. For the best possible research, what you want to have is a double-blind, placebo-controlled experiment. It's the gold standard of research experiments in science. What does double blind mean? That means neither the researchers nor the subjects know whether they're in the experimental group or the control group. And the two groups are the same with the exception of the one variable that you're testing. So your research and your experimental and your control groups are identical. They're made up of the same average age. They have the same, like gender breakdown, age breakdown, race, people of multiple races, multiple ethnicities, all of that kind of stuff. The only thing that is different between the two groups is just whether they're receiving the active treatment or not. That is the gold standard for the best possible research. All right, so we take a large population of subjects with rickets. This is going to be like our experiment with sun exposure and so forth. You randomly divide them into two different groups. One group is going to receive a vitamin D supplement. The other one will receive a placebo, so no vitamin D. And then you look to see, did the vitamin D cure the rickets in the experimental group? And did the control group remain unchanged? If yes, then we think vitamin D cures rickets. If no, then we revise the hypothesis and retest. So yeah, that's kind of how you would do a controlled scientific experiment. The other thing is, if you're just really confused and there's so much information out there, talk to a nutrition expert. So who would that be? The gold standard here, the most educated, the person with the most training in the field is going to be a registered dietitian nutritionist, or an RDN. They have completed at least a bachelor's degree at an accredited U.S. college or university, and a supervised practicum, passed national exams like board exams by the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. They have an understanding of medical nutrition therapy, which is really good because it helps to integrate your care team, your doctor, your family doctor, your specialist, and all of that. And it integrates your health conditions into the nutrition counseling, the dietary changes based on your own health, your current health, and your medical history. So a registered dietitian nutritionist would be the best person to talk to. Public health nutritionists are similar. They might have a degree, but not the RDN. So they're similar. They're going to have, similar advice for you, similar stuff, but it's not necessarily going to be based on your own personal health. It's going to be maybe like a little bit more general stuff. If you go to a licensed dietitian nutritionist, an LDN, they are licensed by a state licensing agency, so that's good. They have to be licensed and they are, overseen by a state agency. But if anybody calls themselves a nutritionist as a generic term and doesn't have an RDN or a public health nutritionist or an LDN behind their names, you want to be wary of them because they might have taken like a couple of online classes or something, but they don't have the type of education that you would want to base your health on. All right, so can you get accurate nutrition information on the internet? You sure can. You just have to be really careful when looking at the sources. You have to be discerning and look at them with a critical eye. So the NIH, National Institutes of Health, has 10 things to consider when you're viewing a health-related website. Who runs it? Who pays for it? Do they list the sources of information? How do you know the information is accurate, right? Is it based on real science? Do they have links to original articles? or are they just making claims with nothing to back it up? Is the information reviewed by experts? How current is it? When was it published? Again, do they link to other sites? Do they link to the original articles? Do they link to, government websites and things of that nature? How do they handle your personal information? Is it secure, or are they just trying to get you in there, sell you something, and steal your information? Do they have a way to contact them? Do they respond to their emails? And then, if you're just seeing it on social media, do you want to click that link? Probably not, because it could be kind of a phishing scam there. So you want to be careful linking to the site through a link in social media. All right. So if you go to a website and you see some of these red flags, this is something that you're going to want to just close that out and go to a different site. So if they claim that there's a quick fix for what ails you, their product miraculously cures you, one product does it all, it clears up your athlete's foot, fungus, and your, high cholesterol and so forth. You can lose weight in a short amount of time without dieting or exercising. So those cleanse things that the celebrities tout on social media, don't listen to them. All right. So if you are concerned about it, you can go to the FTC site and they can they have a list of kind of the most recent scams that are going around on the internet. So if you're concerned about something and you're not sure if it's real or not, maybe check out the FTC website and see if that particular scam is listed. All right. That is where we're going to end the chapter 1 lecture. So remember that for this week, you're going to want to complete the discussion board on Blackboard in week 1, and you're going to want to do your homework assignment on Pearson. And again, there was a little bit of a hiccup with that at the bookstore, so I will let you know when that link becomes available. With anything else that you might need, please send me an email. Have a great semester.